Okay, so today's lesson, we are going to be watching a video, and it is just a recap of what we have experienced in our past, specifically in the last 1,000 years in Europe, and now currently in the United States and all over the world. We are experiencing a sense of mass hysteria. So there are two questions that you are going to be asked throughout this lesson. The first is, in what way have we as a country helped to prevent a mass hysteria from occurring during our current pandemic? And also, in what ways have we perpetuated the idea of mass hysteria? So I'd like you to right now, with a pen or and a piece of paper, I'd like you to write these two questions down because you are going to jot notes as we watch the video. And hopefully your class is able to have a thorough and academic conversation about how our past currently relates to our present.
In the summer of 1518, on the western edge of the Holy Roman Empire, something so strange and bizarre occurred that you might not believe it. In the city of Strasbourg, an unusual epidemic took hold of the locals, causing hundreds of people to dance erratically in a mad frenzy. Now known as the dancing plague of 1518, it started with just one woman and quickly grew to 34 people within a week. A month later, 400 people had been taken over by the epidemic, seemingly unable to control their bodies as they wildly danced around the city. People would dance uninterrupted for days or weeks until they collapsed from exhaustion, causing dozens of deaths. The city officials somehow came to the conclusion that the victims would only recover their minds if they continued to dance uninterrupted. They even constructed a stage for the dancers and hired musicians and professional dancers to help keep them dancing. As more people started to die from heart attacks and strokes, the city officials rethought their approach. It was believed that the dancing was caused by a saintly curse. Acts such as gambling and prostitution were banned, and those people deemed to be immoral were driven out of the city. The dancers were taken to the altar of St. Vitus to pray for their salvation. Within a few weeks, the dancing had subsided, and people regained control of their bodies. As unbelievable as the dancing plague of 1518 is, it is not the only example of dancing mania, with several other cases documented throughout Europe between the 11th and 16th century. But why did people suddenly lose control of their bodies? And why don't we have dancing epidemics anymore? Let's find out. One explanation, proposed by Eugene Bachmann, argued that the dancing plague was caused by the ingestion of ergot, a mold that grows on the stalks of damp rye, which can cause hallucinations, spasms and tremors. However, this does not explain how people were able to dance for days and weeks on end, or why so many people reacted in the same way. A more likely explanation is mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria, which can be broadly defined as the rapid spread of illness signs and symptoms, for which there is no plausible organic origin. But what triggers a case of mass hysteria, such as the dancing plague of 1518? Some common characteristics between different cases include fear, stress, anxiety, fear of death, and the role of leadership in managing the outbreak. The 16th.
So I want to pause for a second. The pandemic we are in right now is currently very real. There is a very real sickness, and it is spreading across our entire world. But I do want to highlight the characteristics of a hysteria from the past in order to talk about how we are relating and how we are behaving today. So I'm going to ask you those questions from the beginning of this lesson. In what ways have we as a country helped to prevent the mass hysteria from occurring during our current pandemic? And in what ways have we perpetuated or made it worse? So a mass hysteria is defined through behaviors of stress, anxiety, fear of death, and the role of leadership. So why don't you jot down right now some ideas about how we as a country are behaving, what is causing us to behave that way, what are we doing to stop a mass hysteria from occurring during everything with Corona, and what things or what behaviors are we engaging in that are making the situation worse. When you guys have your discussion or you've answered your questions, you can press play and move on.
Break. The 16th century was certainly a harsh and difficult time to be alive, but the years leading up to 1518 were especially difficult for the citizens of Strasbourg. Repeated famines, harsh taxes, the rise of syphilis and the highly contagious sweating sickness all combined to create an environment ripe for mass hysteria. But why dancing? This was due to the curse of St. Vitus. One of the 14 holy helpers, St. Vitus was a Christian saint from Sicily. On the 15th of June, St. Vitus's Day, people would celebrate by dancing in front of his statue, known as the St. Vitus dance. People believed that saints not only cured sickness, but could cause it as well, and there was a pre-existing belief that St. Vitus would curse people with a dancing mania. It's only with this pre-existing belief could the extreme psychological stress people were undergoing be converted into an uncontrollable urge to dance. This, alongside the city authorities' misdirected attempts to stop the dancing, caused the outbreak to spread rapidly. The diminishing importance of saint worship in the 17th century meant the end for dancing plagues, as the characteristics of mass hysteria depend on the historical and social-cultural settings. From the 14th to the 18th century, cases of mass hysteria were characterized by histrionic behavior such as demonic possession, witchcraft, and dancing plagues. From the 18th to the 20th century, during the rise of the Industrial Revolution, mass hysteria tended to occur in the workplace, consisting of convulsions and neurological complaints. In the last 100 years, modern cases of mass hysteria have centered on contaminated food and water supplies, as well as toxic odors. Mass hysteria is difficult to diagnose, as it's normally only identified once all other possible causes have been excluded. Likewise, little is known about how best to treat outbreaks, but a review of the scientific literature by Simon Wesley has suggested the following guidelines. 1. Separate those who are ill from those who are not. 2. Communicate that the environment is safe via an authority figure to reduce the group anxiety. 3. Remove any social validation or reinforcement the people suffering from mass hysteria may be receiving. The majority of outbreaks last less than 2 weeks, and the role of public health agencies and the media in reducing fear and anxiety is the key to limiting the spread of hysterical behaviour. Mass hysteria has caused some of the strangest behaviours in history, from meowing nuns to laughing epidemics, and with the difficulty in researching and fully understanding its causes, it's likely that the outbreaks will continue to occur for a long time to come.
Okay, so in the video, they talk about the role of public health agencies and the role of media to reduce public anxiety. So I asked you the same 2 questions again. In what ways have we as a country helped to prevent this mass hysteria from occurring during our current pandemic? And in what ways have we perpetuated the idea of mass hysteria? The video talks about how, again, the CDC or the role of health organizations and media can really help reduce anxiety. It also says that they can last for less than 2 weeks if controlled. And then finally, it states that it predicts that these mass hysteria events will continue to happen in our future. So how are we helping this situation that we are in right now, and how are we making it worse? And then furthermore, what can we do to contain or possibly stop the hysteria? I mean, our pandemic is very real right now, but there are also things that we can do to calm people's nerves and calm people's anxiety as we live through this. This is a time in history that people will never forget. And hopefully in years to come, when we reflect upon it, we can analyze our behavior and say, yes, we did everything we could to make sure that people felt safe and comfortable during the time of Corona. I hope your discussions go well in your class, and I'm interested to see what you guys have to offer.